There's a lot of retention going on right now, so the names aren't as big, but free agency is still all the way live. It's important, and we got the frenzy here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I get it. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. Of course, I'm joined by my man, Kevin Ostraca, my brother from another mother here on this fabulous Tuesday. We also like to thank the everydayers for joining us. I'm reminding you, you can get the podcast, whether you watch or listen, wherever you get them, make sure you tap in to that location. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start this thing off right, and we're going to fire it right on up. In segment 3, we're going to end up talking about the Giants and the Vikings. The Giants have made some moves. They still need to make another move and get a quarterback. We'll discuss who that could be. And the Vikings are really, really, really building in their trenches. I mean, that's a 14-win team that has done some very nice things. So we'll go over that. 2 other playoff teams that got more quality instead of the quantity so far after day one have been the Bucs and the Broncos. They got the memo. We will hear from both of those teams and discuss that, but not to bury the lead right at the very top. I was wondering in Philly, with all these dominoes falling, they retained Zach Bond. Josh Sweat is moving on and going to Arizona. Can they run it back? Can they afford to? And then Howie the Great is going to make a lot of decisions. And so far, he made a big one right before we started this show. CJ Gardner-Johnson, the catalyst and one of their team leaders, along with Darius Slay, are now both gone. CJ traded to the Houston Texans today. In a little bit of a shocker for me. I don't necessarily think it was a mistake because it's Howie Roseman. Give me your opinion on it, KO.
I'll tell you, the Texans right now, I'll say confuse me. And what I mean by that is obviously we saw the Laramie Tunsil trade yesterday of him going to Washington. In this deal, Kenyon Green was in the trade, and they're losing offensive linemen left to right. I'm concerned for CJ Stroud's safety right now, personally, based off of how that line played last year. And now you get rid of your best player on that line and another guy that I know Kenyon Green is not like a Laramie Tunsil, but still, you're going to have to figure out what you want to do there if you're Houston. Houston in the secondary on the back end, they had to figure out some stuff. Obviously, Derek Stingley is there, and you have some other options. But more from a Philly side of things, we know that teams can't keep everybody, right? Salary cap doesn't allow you to do that regardless of how much it increases, but Philly's lost a lot. And like you said, with Darius Slay now in Pittsburgh and CJ Gardner-Johnson now over there in Houston, what does it look like for them? They have a lot of young talent still there. Kenyon Mitchell's not going anywhere. Cooper DeJean's not going anywhere. They still have guys, but are they, especially with the Milton Williams deal and Josh Sweat and all the stuff you mentioned too, like that's a lot of money they're not putting into their own guys. So does that mean they're going to make a splash for like Jair Alexander? Would they make a move like that potentially? Or are they gearing up for a guy that's available that we don't even know is available right now? So I know it might not look great on paper for Philly, but this is what everybody expected to happen. Now, I think that CJ actually getting traded wasn't in the cards for a lot of people, but I don't think anybody expected Milton Williams back there. I don't think anybody expected Josh Sweat or Darius Slay to come back. So it's more so par for the course, but when it's happening and it's actually in the process of everybody's leaving, you look at that roster and you're like, hold on a second. All that depth Philly had doesn't look so deep anymore.
I want to hear Lou Dibiase, and Lou is a big Howie Roseman fan. Of course, Philly's riding high. But sometimes when you win a championship, everybody wants to get paid. Let's see how he talks about this, and I'll give you my theory on the Eagles when we get back.
Well, I thought there was very little Howie Roseman could do this offseason to make me upset, but he found a way to do it. The Philadelphia Eagles are trading Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and a 6th-round draft pick to the Houston Texans for former first-round right guard Kenyon Green and a 5th-rounder. I'm Lou Dibiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I get it from the Kenyon Green side of things. This is a former first-rounder that can be your new Mekhi Becton-like project to replace Becton, a good talent that fell out of favor with his team. Jeff Stoutland could potentially turn into yet another top-tier player. I understand kicking the tires on Green, But to give them Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, like, did we not learn from what happened in 2023, letting this guy go? 6 interceptions, walking out the door. The energy of this defense, he was a more mature vocal leader this time around, a physical piece to the run game, a great tackler. I just saw what this, move last time did to this defense, and I think it's a mistake letting Chauncey go, even if you didn't want to pay.
Hey, the man says he made a mistake. And look, even though Howie Roseman has proven to be one of the best GMs in the league, that doesn't mean that you can't question some of the things that he does, right? And in this situation, I understand Lou's point. And he made the point about Kenyon Green that I was going to make, another first-round pick that's coming there to probably be their swing interior offensive lineman, because they do have Tyler Steen still under contract, and they still have Cam Jurgens, and of course Landon Dickerson isn't going anywhere. So to get another dude that's 320 pounds who has good pedigree, it seems like a very, very important thing for them to do. I also believe that the Eagles, with where they're picking and where they're choosing, they're not concerned about losing Slay and CJ's experience, because they already have 2 rookies that got the ultimate experience in their first year in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Watch out for Malachi Starks, who everybody says is falling in the draft, and he plays at Georgia. It sounds like it's making a lot of sense that that's the way this thing's going to set up a little bit, KO.
If he makes it past Baltimore, I'm going to be mad, first of all. If he makes it to Philly, that means Baltimore passed on him, and unless they trade it out, and I'm not going to let that happen. I'll walk the card up there myself for the Ravens if I have to get Malachi Starks. But you're exactly right. Even guys like Nicky Manwari and some of these other safeties that have – he had one of the most historic combines we've ever seen. And so for Philly, you look at a team, well, what does that team need? And those needs can be dictated by what happens in free agency. And so far, we've seen Philly lose a lot of guys. But how did they get to this point in the first place? Well, they drafted well. I mean, that's the thing. You look at guys, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, CJ, all these guys, well, not CJ, but like most of these guys have been homegrown talents. And then other than that, it's like, yes, they got CJ from the Saints the first time around, got him again. Like, they make those moves and they don't necessarily give up a ton. It's not like they don't make blockbuster trades. They certainly do. But you look at Milton Williams being a mid-round guy, Josh Sweat being underrated, and those guys now go off and get $100 million, 80, 90, 100, all those types of deal contracts. That is a testament to how Philly drafts, and not just in the first round. Guys they get in the middle rounds too. So as much as it's going to hurt to lose that depth, I think Philly can build it right back up, because the guy running the show has proven that he can go out there and draft that talent, find diamonds in the rough. And that's what a lot of these teams need with quarterbacks on big deals like a Jalen Hurts. It's, can you hit on your mid-round picks, get production from rookies? You mentioned Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Those are guys you can have now for Kenyon Mitchell, the next 4 with the 5th-year option, Cooper DeJean, the next 3. You can have those guys on your roster. It's such a low cost. And then obviously for the rest of the guys, you can get rookie contracts up and down this roster with the stars they have. That's perfect roster construction with an expensive quarterback.
I think people need to start realizing this. Everyone might deserve to get paid. It's unrealistic that everybody can get paid. That's a very good player. And take solace in the fact that this dude has built 2 championship teams that look totally different within a 7-year period. I think I'm going to trust Howie Roseman. Doesn't mean it's going to pan out. Doesn't mean that CJ Gardner-Johnson isn't a good player. I'm going to trust the guy that has proven over and over again that he absolutely knows what he's doing. And you never know. CJ might have went and asked him for more money, and they felt like, nah, that's not going to happen. So I don't think it's a mistake. I'm going to withhold judgment until we start to see some results. And the results, I expect them to be very, very good next year. 2 teams that made the playoffs. One was a surprise last year, and the other one wasn't. That's the Bucs and the Broncos. They made the playoffs, and now we're interested to see how they add little pieces to the team. I think they made some big signings yesterday, and we'll talk about that here in just a second on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere between $100 and $250 per session, but with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable with over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped. It's the world's largest online therapy platform. Look, man, I had kids that I had to put through therapy, and I paid out of pocket because I was self-employed, and it almost crushed me. You don't have to worry about that with BetterHelp because you could save 50%. That's right. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's 10% off your first month at BetterHelp, which is spelled better, HELP.com/locked on. All right, moving along with my man Kevin Ostraca. There he is. I got to get him on the screen, my boy. I should have left my ugly face off, but anyway, I didn't do that. But man, KO, man, there's some teams, man, that made some really, really interesting moves yesterday. I'm going to start here with the NFC, the Tampa Bay Bucks. My mocks, I had them taking an edge rusher out of BC because you heard Todd Bowles really, really emphasize the fact that they needed somebody that could chase the quarterback. And this is a situation where that player doesn't have to be a complete player. You are there for one thing, and that is to go chase quarterbacks. And they signed a guy yesterday that's pretty good at doing that and made a retention signing that I also think is critical to their success. Listen to James Yako from Locked On Bucks talk about it.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers come out swinging the first day of the open negotiating period. James Yarko here from Locked On Bucks, talking about the Bucks making major signings right out of the gate. They bring back Levante David over the weekend. They come to an agreement with Ben Bredeson early on Monday, and then right after the open negotiating period, they agreed to a 3-year, $66 million deal to bring back Chris Godwin, who reportedly left $20 million on the table from another team to return to Tampa. And then shortly after that, they come to a 1-year, $14 million agreement with edge rusher Hassan Reddick, immediately focusing on the biggest need of this team heading into the offseason, and that was edge rusher. They have Yaya Diaby, they have Chris Braswell, their second-round pick from last year, but they didn't have that marquee guy, and Hassan Reddick comes to the Buccaneers to help the pass rush, help out Todd Bowles' defense to complement that top 4 NFL offense from last season. For more on this and all things Buccaneers, make sure you check out the Locked On Bucks podcast 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
He's right. I think they did exactly what they needed to do. They really, really sought out exactly the players that they needed. Hassan Reddick's going to be in a good spot here because there's always the complaint that he does one thing and doesn't do anything else. Well, the one thing he does is exactly what they want.
And that's the most important thing when it comes to the edge rusher position, it feels like these days, and that's getting to the quarterback. So I feel like for Tampa, and look, when we talk about this division, you and I, it's a wide open division. Now, Tampa's defending their division title here, but you're trying to stop teams like Atlanta, maybe New Orleans if it gets a little spicy, maybe Carolina if it gets even spicier than that. Feels like Tampa is the team in that NFC South, but it's time for them to take the next step, right? We're not talking about NFC South titles for them anymore because they're going to be seen as the favorite this year, in my opinion, even with Michael Penix in Atlanta in year 2 in that whole situation. It's about being able to continue to evolve in the playoffs. And what do you need in the playoffs? Well, you need good wide receivers. You were able to bring back one of your guys in Chris Godwin at a much cheaper rate, and you still have Mike Evans over there. And plus the Hassan Reddick deal is like, yes, they badly needed pass rushers. And while there were a lot of options available to them, I think for a player in Hassan Reddick, who we know has been so dominant recently, and I know the last year was weird with the holdout and the trade and him not coming back for a lot of the season, I think it's a good bet because on a 1-year deal, that's money that, if it doesn't work out, you're not committed for 2 more years after that. You're able to kind of reset and say, hey, we took a swing on a guy that over the, 4 of the past 5 seasons, maybe more than that, has been highly, highly productive. And you're expecting with just a normal offseason, just a normal year from him, right, he can get back to that production too. And so even with guys like Ben Bredeson, who you get for just a little over $20 million, and you're just trying to fit those pieces together, you want to build a team around Baker. You bring back guys like Levante David to be leaders of that defense, which he's been for so many years now. I think Tampa will win the NFC South again this year, unless, Atlanta has this huge jump, which is possible, but I'm predicting Tampa right now. We'll see. This is very early, by the way. I'm putting my disclaimer out. This is subject to change, but I'm going Tampa right now. But can they get past the Washington? Can they get past the Philly? Can they get past the Detroit? I wouldn't put them over those teams right now. So it's about being able to take that next step. And I think Tampa, at least from day one, took direction in doing that.
They did. They did. They really, really did. And it's the type of team, in my opinion, that like they didn't need like a whole bunch of stuff. I think the guys that they just have to improve the young guys to get better. I think Baker has to continue to be Baker. They obviously have to replace a play caller. They've done that 2 years in a row. Chris Godwin getting healthy. They probably should have beat Washington without him and gone up to play Philly. You add a healthy Chris Godwin to that team, man. I think the sky is really, really the limit. They're going to run this back this year, and now they're going to do it with a dude that can chase quarterbacks. We're going to talk about here the Denver Broncos as well, because that's another team that had certain things that they needed. They were able to get some depth by signing offensive tackle Matt Pearl. He re-signed to a 2-year, $7 million deal. That sort of solidified their depth on their offensive line. Jared Stidham, they brought him back, so that's continuity, and Bo Nix needs a buddy. Here's where it got interesting for me. They went to San Francisco and got 2 real good players that run like the wind, and they play like their feet and their hair are on fire. That's linebacker Drake Greenlaw, who signed to a 3-year deal worth $35 million, and Talanoa Hufanga, who is like Troy Polamalu-like a little bit, who can run around and fly around. He got a 3-year deal worth up to $45 million with $20 million guaranteed. How do you assess what Denver did?
I really liked it. And we know that this defense was so dominant last season. And obviously, a couple of games last year, they faltered. But I know that a lot of people, when assessing that Denver defense, it was a bunch of names that you're like, oh, who is this guy? Like, this guy's really good, but I'd never heard of him before. Yep. And I think that's a testament to Denver's coaching staff. Yeah. And the ability for them to develop their talent. But now you add a couple of proven guys in there. Not that the guys on Denver's defense aren't proven now, but I think for a guy like Dre Greenlaw coming off the injury, I think he's going to be super motivated. And obviously Hufanga, who I think is a really solid player. And honestly, it's not far removed from being one of the best safeties in the league. Obviously, injuries kind of derailed his career a little bit as well. I think, in my opinion, what Denver's doing on the defensive side of the ball is really important. But now I think the attention turns. Evan Ingram left without a deal. They need a tight end. Is he a possibility for them? I think it makes a lot of sense. But, at the time of this recording, we don't know where Evan Ingram's going to go. So even if you want to add another wide receiver, if you're Denver, I think could be good for Bo Nix in that offense, because you have Cortland Sutton and, you have a couple of other talented players there. But now your attention turns. Javonte Williams is now in Dallas. What does that run game look like in 2025? So Denver's not done. I think Denver saw the year they had. Everybody thought Denver was going to be, okay, this is a rebuild.
I thought they were garbage. Yeah, I thought they were trash.
What is Bo Nix going to have this season? Well, they outperformed all expectations, and now that they know who Bo Nix is, I think they should get a little more aggressive. And I think that we saw that in day one with 2 really good former 49ers.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, because Sean Payton loves tough guys, right? Guys that fly around, and you think of all the trouble that people were getting in back in New Orleans. Say what you want to say about them. CJ Gardner-Johnson was one of them. All of those, they just love guys that fly around. When you think about Detroit and how they play, that's how New Orleans played under Sean Payton. And it looks like that's the exact same thing that they're doing there in Denver. I like both signings for that team. And if they get both of these dudes, look, I know Evan Ingram left without a contract, but guess what? There are good tight ends that's going to be there in the 3rd round that you can get. And now this puts them in the catbird seat where they're sitting in the 20s with the 1st round pick, and somebody beautiful is going to fall to them. I think it's going to be one of those receivers. I think it's going to be one of those 2 or 3 of those tight ends. It might even be a running back if nobody bites on Ashton Jeanty early because of the depth of that position in the draft. I think Sean Payton's just sitting back going, he got a Mai Tai right now, man. It's like whatever you bring here, we're going to be able to put it on our team, and there's a numerous spots that we can get help. All right, speaking of help, the Vikings. People forgot about them last year, kind of wrote them off a little bit, and then they won all of those games, and then they dudded out at the end of the year. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a really, really good football team. They do. And they did something at the start of free agency that good football teams do. They focused on the trenches. We will discuss the Minnesota Vikings and more here in the 3rd segment of Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by TurboTax. That's right. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTaxes. Taxes used to be you sitting around waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get some money back or if you're going to have to pay. Now, you don't have to do that anymore because Taxes is matching with the TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return. Wow. You get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything within 100% accuracy. All you can do is just sit back and get ready to collect your money, and that's guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is what Taxes is. Get an expert now at TurboTax, only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at turbotax.com/guarantee. All right, moving along here on Locked On NFL. Where's your team every day? I'm here with my man, Kevin Ostraca. Kevin, the Giants, right before we started this, they moved on from Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones now has a one-year deal who's going to be in Indianapolis. They say to quote-unquote compete with Anthony Richardson. I don't think there's no competition. I think Daniel Jones is going to be their quarterback. They have a lot of stuff that they need over there with the Giants, man. And they're making some moves. They lost Xavier McKinney last year. They think they replaced him a little bit this year. We'll see what happens. But listen to Patricia Trainer talk about the New York Giants and their day one.
In a pleasant surprise, the New York Giants are keeping a very underrated yet valuable member of their franchise. Receiver Darius Slayton, who quite frankly seemed as though he might be done with the Giants after last season between the constant losing and the fact that the team didn't extend his contract last spring when he sought an extension, has resigned with the team on a reported 3-year, $36 million deal. As the Giants' wide receiver 2 last season, Slayton only saw 8 fewer targets in 2024 than he did in 2023. This despite the arrival of rookie Malik Nabers, who saw over 100 targets. However, Slayton also recorded his second lowest reception total, that being 39 receptions in the 16 games he played. That said, Slayton, who along with defensive lineman Dexter Lawrence II is the longest tenured member of the team, holds a lot more value than just what you see on the field. He's well respected in the locker room and has been a steady influence on the Giants' young receiving core, particularly Nabers, who gave him a lot of credit for helping him to turn into a pro's pro.
Good signing, Darius Slayton, fast receiver, a little bit of a body catcher, but he never drops balls, so it's no big deal. My biggest question is, who the hell's going to throw the ball to him?
Yeah, at time of this recording, no quarterback move has happened. So could it be Aaron Rodgers? Could it be Russell Wilson? Seems like those are the only two options for the Giants right now, unless they want to kind of go a little bit a tier below that. And we're already talking a low tier right now with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. But I didn't like the Giants offseason last offseason. Wig, everybody didn't like their offseason letting Saquon Barkley go. They paid the same contract out to Darius Slayton that they could have paid out to Saquon Barkley that Philly gave them. And here we are now. I think, yeah, hindsight is 20/20, although we all knew it back then too. But now I think the Giants, I like the Javon Holland move. I think that's a really solid and actually a good deal for the Giants. I thought he was going to command more. And you mentioned McKinney going. They replaced him with a Holland-type player. But you're right. It's like when the Giants are going up, and really it feels like the Steelers and the Giants are the two teams looking for quarterbacks. They might have their preference, one or the other. It looks like both teams are kind of going the Aaron Rodgers route when you're trying to get a guy like that in the building. Well, okay, the Steelers just got DK Metcalf, so what is your argument if you're the Giants? As well, we have Malik Nabers, really awesome young wide receiver. But then what else is your argument? Because the Steelers are the team that if Aaron Rodgers goes there, at least they're going to have a shot at competing. I mean, if Rodgers goes to the Giants, is there enough around him and Nabers to have him compete? And for Rodgers, yes, there's the whole New York thing and this, that, and the other. You wouldn't have to go far. But does he really want to spend his last couple of years, if he's going to play, let's say 2 more years, wasting away on that Giants team? So I don't really know what the Giants' outlook is here. They have pieces here and there. I like some of the moves they've made, but I just think the outlook would be so much brighter if they had just put enough the money for Saquon Barkley, and we'd be having a much different conversation right now.
Yeah, they look like they're trying to repair a mistake, especially with the Javon Holland signing. He is a good player. But I got one problem. Xavier McKinney's a good player. He was right in house, and y'all got rid of him. And now it seems like what you're trying to do is fix the mistake you made last year. McKinney's probably a better player than Holland. It's close, but I think he probably is a better player. Joe Shane is running this organization like he's doing dynasty football, bro. And it really, I think they're going to be in trouble until they get rid of him. I like some of the moves. I understand it. But in other words, when I'm like this on day one of free agency, I didn't see them do anything differently. I would, if you let go of McKinney, you better have a young guy behind him that you feel like is he should be what Cam Jurgens was to Jason Kelsey. That's the only reason you let guys go. You don't go out the next year and spend all of that money just to, if there's a running back that's going to hit the market, the Giants might go sign him now just to make up for the mistake that they made last year. And I ain't letting them off the hook. The Minnesota Vikings, good, solid organization with a real good, solid head coach. I am a firm believer in the fact that they are built the correct way. They have the right coordinators on their team. There's a little bit of attrition. Grant Udinski, who's an offensive assistant, is now in Washington. But make no mistake about it. When in doubt, get big people. And we're going to hear my man up with the Vikings, Luke Braun, talk about all the additions of those big people in Minnesota.
Right, free agency is well underway. We've got some catching up to do. I'm about to go live here on Locked On Vikings. If you can catch that, catch that. If not, the audio will be up wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or you can catch it on the YouTube channel as well on the live tab. But here's what we got so far. The big one is Ryan Kelly joining. He maybe bumps Garrett Bradbury out of that job. That's a big move at center. Garrett Bradbury has a bunch of money on his contract that's about to vest. It's about to become guaranteed. So he could be cut in like the next couple of days, if even it takes that long. If he does stay past that trigger, then you're going to have some kind of crazy camp competition. But Ryan Kelly, long-established player, there's that. There was also Isaiah Rodgers, a corner from the Eagles, ended up in kind of a rotational role after a gambling suspension. So we got to deal with that as well and kind of figure out how we feel about that guy. Both those contracts fairly small. So the Vikings are still sort of bargain bin shopping around the edges while they work on a couple of bigger deals with, say, Jonathan Allen or Byron Murphy, but we'll talk about it all on Locked On Vikings.
Yeah, so Minnesota has added big people. He talked about Ryan Kelly. I'm a little bit wary of that because Kelly has some injuries and he hasn't played as well as he used to. He just hasn't. That's a part of it. But retaining Aaron Jones, the big one is Will Fry. So they got both guys from the interior, and then they go out here and add Jonathan Allen to that mix. Also, they got him a 3-year deal for $60 million. They retained Byron Murphy. They did lose one defensive back yesterday, but I really do believe that this team is running it back. And I think now they have to ask the question: are we going to go ahead and go with JJ McCarthy? Do we do a 1 year? It'd be the funniest thing ever if they sign Kirk Cousins just for 1 year. I don't think they're going to do it. But these are big moves. Like, when in doubt, just get big people, man. Big people that can play, and that's exactly what they did.
All starts up front. It all starts in the trenches. And for Minnesota, now that Sam Darnold's over in Seattle, JJ McCarthy is their guy. I feel like what you have is an opportunity to continue to build. And this is, again, what you do when you have a quarterback on a rookie contract. Obviously, they weren't going to pay Sam Darnold that money. They wanted more flexibility, and they weren't just going to spend that first rounder on JJ McCarthy, then put him behind Darnold for the first 4 years of his career. Right. So this was a move that everybody expected to happen. But now in doing so, what do you want to do for a rookie quarterback? You want to protect him. And so you get two guys from the Colts interior, like you talked about, on the defensive line. I think John Allen, I know there are questions about the injury concerns and whatnot, but when he is healthy, he is still a really good player despite his age. And so those are the types of deals, those are the types of risks you want to take if you're a team that is kind of, again, you talk about the Phillies, the Detroits, the Washingtons of the world. I think people put Minnesota and maybe Green Bay in a tier together below those teams. So I like the move from Minnesota. Plus, if you're going to compete with Detroit like they did last year for the NFC North, it came down to the wire week 18. I think that, these will help when it comes to Minnesota maybe surpassing Detroit this season.
Yeah, I agree with you about that. And one thing about these additions I look at is this. You can look at the players and just judge them in a vacuum, but you can look at where they're going. these players might not project to do as well if they go somewhere else. I trust the brain trust, offensively and defensively. I trust the brain trust of Minnesota because they know who they are. They know exactly what they're trying to obtain. And I just think it's a very good deal for them. That's a really good team that added some really, really quality players. Quality over quantity for them. My Jaguars signed 9 players, and the fans are going like, who are these dudes? And so there's a reason why teams that are winning and teams that are close to the playoffs are very, very selective in free agency. You can be very, very selective too with what you listen to every single day. I love Locked On NFL. I love Locked On Ravens and Locked On Jaguars. But just what? After your first listen, your second listen, you can check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. That's really important now that we've seen the direction that these teams are going in. They're not done in free agency, and we're not done either. We'll be back tomorrow. My man KO will be back next Tuesday. I used to call it Wednesday. Remember, I got it right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a throwback.
Yeah, my man KO will be back here, and I'll be back tomorrow as well. You guys take care of each other. Enjoy the free agent frenzy as the early tampering period, wink, wink, is underway, and they'll sign everybody tomorrow. We'll see you next time here on Locked On NFL.